Hello, I'm Constable Vanis with the Winnipeg City Police. I work out of our Guns and Gangs unit, and I'm the Gang Prevention Coordinator. Thank you all for watching this evening. We're going to do a gang awareness presentation. As we had spoke earlier in our public forum at the end of October, our Guns and Gangs unit is going to be looking to educate on a monthly or bi-monthly basis different avenues to do. Due to COVID, we're just going to do a pre-recorded one, and we hope to do maybe a virtual or a fire talk later on as things kind of progress. So, talking about gangs, what is a gang? Many people have different definitions and thought process of what a gang is. I mean, it's the way we look at it as in the police and in the criminal justice system, it's a group of 3 or more people, committing an offense for a financial benefit. Some are wearing symbols, logos, signs, they do graffiti and clothing. That's kind of the idea in regards to gangs. But nowadays, as things are starting to progress, and people are starting to be aware, they're starting to go a little bit more kind of like covertly or undercover, I would say, and they're starting to hide from the police. So they're not as prevalent and visible when it comes to like the signs and symptoms and colors and that kind of thing. But moving on, and like I said, this is just going to be a very short 15-minute blurb, just so you can give you the general idea. I'm going to offer you some resources as the presentation goes on. Take a note of those resources, and I'm always going to be available, and I'll give you contact information for myself. But some of the signs, person at risk enrolled in gangs, they start owning more than one cell phone. These are younger kids, typically, that we're starting to see even as young as 12 years old entering, kind of gang life. They're isolated from friends and family. So you're starting to see like them separating from their friends and their regular friends to a whole different group. But some of that group, they're not very open to telling you who that they're with. They're starting to hide information from you. You're starting to ask questions and these types of things, and they're being distant in providing that information. You start seeing weapons. I mean, weapons would be a common thing, would make you concerned. Somebody might say, oh, it's just for protection. Well, what do you need protection for, right? Why are you carrying a weapon? To protect yourself, which means there's a concern that's existing within that individual has. This means something's happened maybe at school or challenges that they've been facing from day to day. Become withdrawn from regular activities, maybe for something like hockey or sports or their community group or whatever they're passionately involved in. They're starting to detach from that. These are all some red flags, just some things to start making your mind think, why are things changing? And how we deal with that, as parents or as caregivers, as supports, we want to ask those questions. Why is this happening? Ask the direct question in regards to your youth or your at-risk person. Moving on, we have different levels of gang involvement, because everyone's like, oh, how does it all break down? And you know what? It starts off with fantasizing, right? These are type of kids that they don't know anything about maybe gang life initially. They're starting to wear some of the clothes that you might see on YouTube videos or whatever, just listening to music. The idea is that this becomes all of them. They become fantasizing. It's like a dream. It'd be like the kid wanting to be the professional hockey player, right? So all of a sudden he starts wearing, the T-shirt of his favorite player, or, his jersey number, that kind of thing, watching all the videos. You can relate that back to kind of gang life. The potential and the wannabes, these people actually start doing things for the gang, such as, maybe a robbery, or they may start selling drugs or trafficking drugs at a very basic kind of like small level. Maybe moving, merchandise for them, like such as the weapons that we had drawn earlier. They might actually have the weapon on them, say, maybe a can of bear spray or a knife or something like that, and they might move it from their house over to somebody else to provide that person protection. So that's kind of where they start becoming wannabes, earning their stripes. So they get told to do things for the gang to then, in the goal to eventually be a full-fledged gang member. And in regards to gang membership. So that's a full-fledged gang member, somebody that's been accepted by the organization. Potentially they've done things for the group. I hate to call it like an organization, because we're talking street-level gangs, but there is a hierarchy and structure that they're trying to mimic in regards to organized crime. But usually run by kids, or young adults, which don't have as much structure and stability to them. So who do gangs recruit? I mean, it's young males, typically, but we're starting to see the influence of more and more females and younger females in regards to getting involved in gang activity. As you can see there, most of the times they'll look sometimes to family or to friends to get involved in gangs. More sophisticated gangs will actually have like a lower level tier of another gang that they'll actually draw from. Because it is important as the kids turn into young adults and in regards to gang life, they manipulate and use the younger kids to take advantage of doing their work for them so they don't end up arrested and incarcerated. So reason kids join gangs, I mean, everybody has, if we knew the magic wand or the reason why somebody joined a gang, right, we'd potentially be able to fix a lot of those problems, and we'd be able to look at it. But everybody has their own draw to gangs. Some of the services, their stand-in family, they don't have the supports at home. They don't have these things behind them. They're looking for security because they don't believe they have it at home, or they're not getting what they need. Some of it is just a recognition. Some of these kids, they strive for that, right? We as adults strive for recognition in our day-to-day jobs and our work, right? We do good work, we want to be recognized. This is what some of the gangs will do for them. They'll give them that recognition. We can go through some of these other points, but like protection, lack of choices, threats, generational, money, drugs, gangs, girls, all these things like sound super exciting, and what's the draw into it? It's that looking back, it's like, what's the consequences of being involved in it? So you get the initial draw, right? And then what's the consequences of this? So yeah, it's great that you have money, you could end up in jail. It's great that you could be supplied some drugs, but you may become an addict. And you're substituting a family that actually really doesn't care about you in regards to gang life. It's only driving more and more their needs, and they're easily to get rid of you. Just like in regards to some of the females that we're seeing, a lot of females are being given the drugs, party drugs, trafficking into the drugs, and then they become addicted, and then the gangs are just pushing them to the side. So those are some of the consequences. Obviously, we can talk a lot longer than this, but this is just a very short overview that I had mentioned earlier. But where it really all begins is just dial dealing. Is trafficking drugs. Most people don't know what dial dealing is. I call it the pizza delivery driver. All over the city, someone has a drug line, it's a cell phone. I'm drawing back to that multiple cell phones. Most kids might be lucky if they have one. I question why somebody would have two, right? And how would a young individual be able to support two cell phones? And if they have one cell phone and they have no job and you never supplied it as a support or a parent, I would suggest that's a significant concern. Maybe asking for where the bill is for that phone, right? Would then give some validity to why your kid may or may not have it. So what happens is a kid's given a small amount of drugs that they are to sell. The phone rings and they answer it, and the person tells them where that they need to meet. There's no further conversation. They don't even know who's on the other end of the line. They might end up going into a back lane late at night to meet with somebody at a drug house or somewhere else. The risk is huge for these kids. And then when I say kids, it is young kids doing this, because the older people don't want to do it. Because maybe they could get ripped off by another drug dealer, another gang member. There's violence associated to that, turfs and territory that people like crossing. But that's what we're starting to see a little bit of a breakdown in Winnipeg with that, with technology and the abilities for transportation and movement, right? That the territories becomes greater, and that these people can then move, more fluidly throughout the city. So once you've kind of done that, and now you're involved in the gang life, gang life leads to other things. It doesn't just stop at drugs or selling small amounts of drugs, because drug supplies could run out, right? And the need to feed the supply or other things could result in the murder, the extortion, the assaults. The more serious offenses, where all of a sudden your gang runs out of drugs because the supply hasn't come in, and they're like, now we're going to go rip off the other drug dealer to get it. Or this person's infringing on our territory. So these are like some of these challenges that these young kids are going to be faced. You do this, or there's a consequence, because violence is the way gangs operate, and that's the fear of why people stay in gangs. Right? They had to succumb to violence to get in. You go through those points before. You got your fantasizing. You got your wannabe and your full-fledged gang membership. First off, you got to do things for the gang. And now they're going to violently assault you to be a part of that gang. And they call that jumped in. So that violence can be so severe that that person is incarcerated or it needs hospital treatment. So the fear to leave a gang is directly associated to that. So when your gang says, go do this because we don't have any money, it becomes a fear thing. And I don't call that a stand-in family. My family is a support for me. And that's really important that we have to look at that, right? But it becomes a fear thing. So moving on, we have gang graffiti versus gang art. Gang graffiti versus graffiti art. And everyone's like, you see pictures on trains and these kind of things. What is gang, what is not? I would suggest, if you can look at the background of this picture, that's going to be like a graffiti art. It's going to be nice to spend some time on. We see it a lot of times on trains, right? We see that a picture on a train. I mean, typically that's not the way gangs would identify themselves, as on a train, because that train car is going to Toronto, right? So that would be more, and they're not marketing themselves to the Toronto or marketing a territory, or wherever the train might go. So what they're actually doing is those type of, even though they might not look great, those are just people trying to tag and send their message all across. When we move on to more like gang graffiti and gang art, gang graffiti, we're starting to look at different things like this. None of these are Winnipeg gangs. I wouldn't promote a Winnipeg gang in any of my presentations. But one of the most important things that we look at is they're kind of sloppy, they're kind of messy, they're all over the place. If you can see on the bottom, there's like a 360. So that's typically what we see, is starting to see letters or numbers. And those numbers are going to associate to letters of the alphabet, which would then identify a gang member. So meaning the first letter, A, B, C, in that case, it says 360 would be a C. Like I said, these are not Winnipeg gangs. But this is what you're trying to do, so that people can represent their area, mark their territory to instill fear for other people. On top of that, sometimes it shows a gang encroaching on another person's territory, which can increase to violence. So I go back to this right away, and first and foremost is, there's a lot of words on here. The biggest word number there is 311. Own your community. We have Winnipeg Winnipeg Graffiti that comes and does it for free. They'll remove graffiti in your back lanes. You don't want people to own your property. You don't want people to own your neighborhood. So take your neighborhood back. Community is what's going to help us through this gang problem, and it's all working together. So be aware of social media as parents and stuff like that. It's really super important. People's social media accounts are paramount. Facebook, Instagram. If you get ever access to your kids' Facebooks or Instagram, I would suggest to you right away, look at their marketing. Look at their on Instagram, the little circle with the line with the circle, where it shows what they've been looking at as marketing tools. Because in there, it'll give you some key information about your kids, right? Of what they've been looking at. Maybe they've been possibly thinking about suicide. They may have Googled it. Well, there might be counseling things that show up in their marketing just by you learning those key bits of information about them. So be aware of their social media. Yes, you can sift through their friends and see their friends' pictures. Great, right? When we look at the bottom point here, posting pictures of signs and drugs and money. I mean, to me, that's a big red flag, right? But if signs and drugs and money become in their marketing pictures, I'm going to tell you, they're probably were looking at that somewhere else too. So you can definitely see they might not be as prevalent with the photos that they're taking. And talk to your kids about it. Speak to your kids about their accounts, what they're using, these different platforms. I mean, I don't know any, and I'm going to date myself, but I'm not that old, and I'm not a huge Snapchatter and all these other things, and there's other platforms where parents, we don't know what they are. But a quick little Google search can give us access to that. And when things are being hidden from our eyes, I have questions about why they're being hidden. And there's nothing wrong with asking those questions. And I think that brings us really to how as parents or caregivers or supports that we can, prevent gang recruitment. And the biggest thing out of all of this is caring, right? Caring about your kids, caring about the people that are around you in your community, having these conversations. You can be a leader and you can be a support to somebody literally just by talking to them and giving them the 10 minutes or 5 minutes of fame a week, because that's impactful, because somebody that doesn't have that family is looking for that stand-in family. Somebody that will actually open up to them, somebody that will actually listen to what they have to say. And you're like, how do I do that when someone shuts down? Share about yourself. If you share about yourself, it's so paramount, because then all of a sudden that relationship starts building. If you expect somebody to share about themselves before you're willing to share about yourself, I'm going to tell you, you're going to make no headway with anybody. So it's just really important. Talk to your kids about conflict resolution. I mean, these are really easy things to do, but like maybe be the Bill Belichick and talk scenarios. Bill Belichick from the Patriots, right? Talk scenarios. What happens in the park if this and this happen? What happens in this? What do you do? Right? And that's okay to talk those type of scenarios with your kids. Know where your kids are. This is a basic one. But I mean, if your kids aren't telling you, your 12-year-old kid's not telling you, it should be a concern of yours. So really want to kind of think of those. Education. Education's kind of like a good one. I mean, when I started too, it's like, where do you learn, right? There's not a course on gang awareness and gang prevention. Obviously, with my policing career, I have experience in it, around gang experts, different programs that I've been involved in. But you as a stay-at-home parent, there's lots of things you can do. Google the internet, right? How to keep my kids out of gangs. Right? CFSAU out of BC is End Gang Life. They have lots of information. There's different books. There's a book on here that says All Eyes on Me. This is a Winnipeg kid who is now an older gentleman. He just wrote a book on his whole life. He spent time in Stony Mountain. So I've about, say, 100 pages into the 200 pages of it, and it's really good and gives insight, first-hand experience. Government of Canada website has a ton of information, like tons and tons of information on gang life, and specific to Winnipeg is on there. And local public forums, like there are lots of open talks about gang life or community forums or community groups that you can involve yourself in. Because what you can learn is so educational to help somebody else, and you can be your source of information. As we kind of get near the end of this, and I mean, we're really close. Like I said, this was just a short little blast that I wanted to make sure to get out some information, as we had committed to that at the end of October, and we continue to commit forward from our Guns and Gangs unit. And we hope to create another forum, maybe one where we can have an exiting gang member come and talk, just as some ideas. And if you have ideas, I would ask you to share those with me. So Manitoba 211 is a great resource. If you want to Google it, there's a tons of information if you're looking for a specific need for your kids, not only just for gang life. There's food, shelter, housing, a ton of resources there. As well as myself. If we flip to the next slide. Like I said, I'm the gang prevention coordinator for the service. I work one-on-one with at-risk youth kids if they need a mentorship or supports or help them align with, maybe they're being fallen through the cracks, and I can help connect some of those dots. I really am open to help however I possibly can. I have a hotline number that just comes direct to my desk, because the 986 gang is definitely an easy number to get a hold of me. And you see WPS-Gang Prevention Coordinator at winnipeg.ca. If all of that fails, right now I'm the only Dallas on the Winnipeg Police Service. Just walk into any police station or talk to a police officer and say, can I get a hold of Dallas? And I will do it. I can say I've done these kind of presentations in public forums before, and you know what? Every time I get excited when I finish these, when I get reached out by somebody and says, "How can you help me?" And that's what I want to do. That's the message, especially from the police service, but also from honestly the deep down in my heart. I really just want to help you, and I thank you guys all very much for your time, and you guys all have a Merry Christmas.